Hello you sexy little swines, I'm Josh from WhatCulture Gaming, and EA have finally revealed Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order to the world. And no, that awkward as hell E3 conference doesn't count as a reveal. Let's just go back to pretending that never ever happened. After a week of teasers, poster reveals, and leaks, Fallen Order's first trailer was unveiled at the Star Wars Celebration in Chicago. The video was entirely CG, sadly with no actual gameplay being shown off, but it was still a confident step forward, and along with the interviews with Respawn, it's painted a pretty clear picture about what the game is actually going to be. Set after the events of Episode 3, but before Episode 4, a time period which is very original and no game has ever done before, Fallen Order picks up with one of the only surviving Padawans of the Emperor's Order 66. The trailer was dark, gritty, and established a pretty compelling premise about a Jedi trying to bring as little attention to him as possible. This might sound bad, but it actually reminded me a little bit of Man of Steel, where Superman tries to not use his powers but ends up unleashing them to save people while working on the job. Just me? Come on, someone must have made that comparison somewhere. But it was also distinctly Star Wars, and it's difficult to not get excited even if we've been burned so many times before. So only one question remains then: will Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order turn around EA's troubled Star Wars universe? I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and this is Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order has just saved EA's Star Wars. Number 6, the previous failed attempts. Look, you don't need me to tell you that the publisher's handling of the galaxy far, far away has been piss. It's been really bad, like really very bad. At this point, 5 years into their deal with Disney, the publisher have cancelled more Star Wars games than they have released. Visceral Games' Ragtag, a single-player focused heist game headed up by Uncharted's Amy Hennig, was the first to be cancelled, with the studio itself being shuttered at the same time. That project was then handed over to EA Vancouver with the aim of being transformed into an open-world live service project, which was once again canned by the publisher a few years later in favour of a smaller title. Even though us fans never actually saw these games in action, their loss was deeply mourned. In theory, they were everything fans wanted from a new Star Wars: story-driven, single-player titles that explored areas of the universe players had never seen before. The games EA actually released, however, were the exact antithesis of this. The original Star Wars Battlefront was a decent enough effort, but it felt particularly clear that the game was rushed out in order to release alongside The Force Awakens. Lacking content, depth, and shipping with no story mode, the shooter was great in small doses, but was very clearly designed for a casual market in order to cash in on the Star Wars hype as much as humanly possible. Plus, even small things were off, and I still have no idea why they showed off Luke in his return attire while fighting Vader on Hoth. There's just something so wrong about that image. Number 5, single-player, story-driven, and no microtransactions. Battlefront 2 was announced a few years later and initially did everything right. This time around, the team was said to be working on an ambitious single-player story about the Empire. Multiplayer options were more robust, featuring maps from each era of Star Wars, and most importantly, EA were doing away with the Season Pass and releasing all maps and modes for free. Of course, that positive turnaround quickly soured with the biggest microtransaction scandal of the decade so far and the most downvoted comment in Reddit history. The game itself, while solid, was hit hard by the need to tear out the in-game purchases and rejig everything at the last minute, but by then, the damage was already done. Consequently, Jedi Fallen Order has everything stacked against it. In the wake of EA's handling of not only the Star Wars license, but other major disasters like BioWare's Anthem, the lack of faith in the company is not at all disturbing, but totally earned. However, if anyone can turn things around, it is Respawn. Everything they've said about the upcoming game has been nothing but positive. For the longest time, fans assumed there'd be some kind of multiplayer live service element, considering Respawn's prior titles and EA's approach to game development in general, but the studio has confirmed that Fallen Order will be single player only and have no microtransactions. Wait, what? Even though it goes against everything EA has said in the past and why they cancelled Ragtag in the first place, Fallen Order will embrace single player and double down on its narrative focus. Which is weird because the publisher has publicly acknowledged that single player is not their jam, even telling shareholders it was one of the reasons Battlefield 5 underperformed. If Fallen Order is a success, it might finally get it into their thick skulls that single player isn't the enemy and not everything has to be multiplayer, especially when it comes to Star Wars. Ow. Number 4, it's built on an engine that actually works. Perhaps an even bigger way it could turn the entire franchise around though is its use of Unreal Engine 4. Now, a shift in game engine might not seem like that much of a huge deal on the surface, but when it comes to pretty much every game EA has published since the dawn of the new generation, there's always been one recurring issue: Frostbite 3. Whether it was BioWare RPGs like Dragon Age Inquisition, Mass Effect Andromeda, or the recent Anthem, or even mainstays like FIFA, pretty much any team that's worked with this technology on a game has reported intense struggles, unless it's been a first-person shooter. Because though the engine is robust and downright beautiful, it's specifically designed for the purpose of creating those first-person shooters. Consequently, when EA made it law that all of their first-party studios needed to adopt the technology wholesale, a good chunk of them ran into trouble. According to reports, Frostbite just doesn't have the tools or the baseline systems for something like a third-person shooter or an open-world game or an RPG. Each time a team has had to start a project like this, they've had to develop even the basic tools from scratch that other studios already have ready and waiting, easily accessible. By the sounds of things, such as Kotaku's extensive reports into BioWare's difficult development on even good games like Dragon Age Inquisition, working with Frostbite is an absolute nightmare. Game development is ridiculously difficult anyway, and it doesn't make it any easier when the developers have to wrangle and war with their own tools just to get basic things to work. Unsurprisingly then, Frostbite 3 was also cited as a major issue on Amy Hennig's Ragtag. When discussing why the process was going so slow on the project, a former developer in the know was quoted as saying that it was missing a lot of tools, a lot of stuff that was in Uncharted 1. It was going to be a year or a year and a half's work just to get the engine to do things that are assumed and taken for granted. Jedi Fallen Order has managed to buck this trend entirely though. It's being made on Unreal Engine 4, which should offset a lot of the development difficulties the previous Star Wars team encountered. This could explain how the project has been turned around so fast. Even though it started development after Ragtag, it was hinted that Respawn's game was actually further along in production when that title was cancelled. Number 3. Respawn's unique creative freedom. But by now you might be thinking, why? Why is Respawn allowed this freedom when Visceral weren't? Well, the reason the developer has managed to be able to avoid so many trends that have plagued all of EA's other games, a focus on live services, microtransactions, Frostbite 3, could be because the game was in production before Respawn were actually bought by EA. That purchase went down back in 2017 when Fallen Order was already in production, so the studio didn't have as many in-house mandates to live, or rather, and more likely, to die by. This is both a blessing and a curse though. It means that Fallen Order can operate slightly outside of the EA system, but it could also mean that it's just a one-off, and after this they'll be forced to adopt the regular tools that every other studio has to. Hopefully though, fingers crossed, if Fallen Order does well under these conditions, and considering just how much bad press the likes of Frostbite and live service mandates have gotten EA over the past few months, it might inspire them to consider changing their stance across the board. I mean, we can hope. It might not happen, but we can hope. Likewise, this wouldn't only help their Star Wars universe and hopefully free up creativity and productivity across EA's first-party slate in general. Number 2, melee combat and force powers. Of course, all of this hinges on the small case of Fallen Order actually being any good. While Respawn have said all the right things and the CG trailer was pretty, it didn't really show anything. Gameplay tidbits can be pieced together though. There was a huge focus on force powers rather than lightsaber combat, which seemingly indicates there'll be just as much of a focus on throwing enemies about rather than just cutting them in half. Also, just to let you know, this is a Respawn game. There was, of course, a wall running segment which did look a little bit odd, but it seems to emphasize the mobility of the title and how force powers will be used outside of combat. And at the end of the day, combat should be something the game excels with, as Stig Asmussen joined Respawn all the way back in 2014 to lead Fallen Order. His pedigree as being the head of God of War 3 should offer vital expertise when it comes to third-person melee combat, something the team hasn't yet attempted in a game. The story itself looks like the kind of narrative fans have been waiting for as well, taking inspiration as much from the comics and the TV shows as it is the movies. Likewise, while EA have bought and ground up plenty of studios over the years, Respawn have been one of the most resilient partners. The 2 Titanfall games have been incredible, with the second one being one of the best first-person shooters of the entire generation so far, with their underperformance mostly stemming from the daft business decisions from EA, like the first title's exclusivity and the second releasing sandwiched between Call of Duty and Battlefield 1. Even the game that should have been their downfall, the free-to-play battle royale game Apex Legends, turned out to be a surprise hit. The title literally didn't have any promotion because EA knew everyone would freak out at what they made Respawn do, and yet it was awesome. Number 1, the tide is turning. Consequently, while it might sound like a utopian pipe dream to hope that Fallen Order will save this entire franchise, if anyone can do it, it's Respawn. With enough time, effort, and freedom, developers working on EA's Star Wars games have been able to make great products. Battlefront 2 completely bombed at launch, yet the devs at DICE have continued to tweak the game, adding new maps, new modes, new characters, and now it's a damn fine shooter. Is it too little too late? I mean, 100% of course it is, but it shouldn't be understated just how well they've turned that ship around. That was just the starter cost though, and Fallen Order with its lack of microtransactions, single player focus, and different engine might be the proof in the pudding that EA need to change their ways. Or it might be force choked to death under the vice-like grip of its publisher. Let's hope not though. So that's all we know about Fallen Order so far. Are you as excited as I am, or is this blind faith only going to result in disappointment? Seriously, I can't take it again. I can't take another Battlefront 2, so please EA, get it right. Either way, while you're down there, could you give us a like, share, subscribe, and head over to WhatCulture.com for more lists and news like this every single day. Even if you don't though, I've been Josh, thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye.